Hi everyone, my name is Karen, this is my channel RatherBeReading, and today I'm bringing to you my January wrap-up. Alright guys, the very first reading month of 2019 is officially over. I am pretty happy with how my reading month went. So to jump straight into my statistics, I read a total of 19 books in January. I also DNF'd one further book. The 19 books that I finished were made up of 16 novels and 3 children's novels. I read 11 books in physical format, I read 4 ebooks, and I listened to 4 audiobooks. And then excluding the audiobooks, I read 11 books that I own and only 4 from the library. I'm really happy with that statistic this month. I read a total of 6,138 pages in the month of January, which averaged out to 198 pages per day, which is right around that 200 page kind of mark that I try to keep it at, so I'm pretty happy with that. The shortest book that I read was 136 pages, which was one of the children's books, and then the longest book that I read was 481 pages. The highest star rating that I gave in January was a 5-star. So I started off the year with a 5-star rating, which is amazing because you guys know if you watch my channel that I'm super stingy with my 5-star ratings. And the lowest starting star rating that I gave was a 2-star. So my average star rating for the month averaged out to 3.57 stars, which I am super happy with. Anytime my average is above 3.5 stars, it means I had a pretty good reading month in terms of star ratings. So I'm really happy with that. So I did film a mid-month wrap-up. If you haven't checked that out, I'll link it in the cards for you guys. But I talked about the first 11 books that I read, plus the DNF. I talked about those in that video, so I will just be talking in depth about the 8 books that I read from the 16th through the 31st of January. So let's jump in. The first book I want to talk about is Saving Montgomery Sol by Mariko Tamaki. This is a YA contemporary story that I listened to on audio. It is narrated by Rebecca Lohman. It's basically about this girl named Montgomery Sol who has 2 mums, and it's basically about she is part of this kind of mystery type club with her 2 best friends, and they just talk about all kinds of weird phenomena, like all different types of stuff, like ghosts and aliens and all different types of things along that kind of line. And then one day, Montgomery gets this crystal called the Eye of No off the internet, and some weird things start to happen. That's the basic gist of the plot. The main problem I had with this story was that it was pretty boring. I also thought that there wasn't a lot of grey in the characters. You have Montgomery and her 2 best friends who are a little bit different compared to the other kids at school, and they are the good people, and then anyone who's not like them is just a complete asshole. Basically, there's no like grey. You're either a really like, you know, popular mean girl and you are literally a real asshole, or you're weird and quirky and therefore a nice person. There wasn't really any grey there, which kind of bothered me a little bit. I did really like the depiction of Montgomery's family life. I thought that was really well done, and the book did have some interesting commentary in it on religion, and how different people's perspectives of religion, and just because you maybe haven't had a positive experience with religion doesn't necessarily mean that religion is a bad thing, which I thought was a really interesting kind of, you know, commentary to have in there. I will also say that another thing that bothered me, I should have mentioned before, is that the characters, particularly at the start of the novel, feel very young. They're supposed to be, I think, like 16, 17. I thought they were about 12 or 13 at the beginning. I do feel like it got a bit better as the story went on, but it definitely felt very young at times. So the book had some good things in there, but nothing totally amazing. And like I said, it actually was quite boring at times. So in the end, I gave that 2.75 stars. I then read Blood for Blood by Ryan Groudon. This is the second book in the Wolf by Wolf duology. The first book follows a main character named Yael, and it's set in 1956 alternate history Germany, kind of, where Hitler and the Nazis won the war. And Yael is a skin shifter. She can change her appearance, and she is entering this motorcycle race where the winner of the motorcycle race gets to meet Hitler, and she wants to win the motorcycle race so that she can kill Hitler and kind of spark a revolution. I really enjoyed the first book, but for me, this second book was even better. It is a war type of story, even though technically World War II is over. You do have, obviously, a lot of people are not happy with what's going on in the world, and it is about trying to spark a revolution. There is a lot of war type stuff happening, and I really appreciated that Ryan Groudon wasn't afraid to make hard decisions with where the story went, because it felt more authentic to what would be happening in a wartime type of story. There was also some really interesting commentary. I thought the way, I don't think its own voices, I'm not sure, but I thought the way the Jewish faith was handled in this was really interesting and really well done as well. This book just made me feel a lot of things basically, and I really, really enjoyed it. And in the end, I gave this second book 4.5 stars. Next, I listened to another audiobook, which was Pride by E.B. Savoy, which is narrated on audio by Elizabeth Acevedo. Pride is a young adult Pride and Prejudice retelling set in Brooklyn, and it is a kind of all POC cast. So it is very diverse in that way, that it is different from, you know, what we see published in most mainstream media. I liked that part of it. I believe that, I can't remember the exact ethnicity of the main character, but everyone in there is a person of color. The main problem, I didn't particularly love this book. There were some things that I appreciated about it, but I didn't think that the Pride and Prejudice retelling parts of the story were handled very well. There are a couple of little like quirks to it that I appreciated. I liked the way the Wentworth Lydia type of storyline was updated for modern times. I liked that, and I did like that instead of like balls, you know, like all the balls or dances that they have in Pride and Prejudice, that we now had block parties. I did like that. So there were a couple of little things that I liked, but the actual romantic parts, which Pride and Prejudice is a romance, all of that part of the story, I didn't think that it was adapted very well in this retelling. I didn't think that it worked. I also didn't really like the main character, Zuri. I found her to be extremely judgmental and extremely self-righteous, and I just couldn't relate to her. She judged people like right from the get-go, and she didn't really, I didn't really think that I saw any particular growth in her with that either. And then yeah, a lot of the parts of the story, to do with the Pride and Prejudice retelling, I just didn't think worked. There were some parts of it, like I said, little parts of it that I enjoyed, but overall it just didn't really work for me, and in the end I gave it 3 stars. I then read Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. This is a Hercule Poirot mystery, and I really, really, really enjoyed this one. The main thing I love about Agatha Christie is that she does different things all the time with her books, which is so interesting from an author who was publishing in like the 1930s. She was constantly doing just different types of storytelling, and I really love that about her. For example, in this book, we know that a murder is going to take place, but the murder doesn't actually happen until about halfway through the book, which normally would annoy me, but it really worked in this story. We get we meet all of the cast of characters, and we know kind of, you have a pretty good idea of like a certain group of people who the murder is going to happen around, because there's something going on with them, and you know that it's probably going to happen around them, but you're not exactly sure who's going to die, or obviously who the murderer is. And all of the suspense and tension that Agatha Christie managed to build leading up to the murder was really well done. And then, of course, once the murder happens and we're trying to unravel this mystery of exactly what happened, Agatha Christie just does it so well. I did guess kind of one part of the mystery, but you can never, in my opinion, guess everything that goes on with an Agatha Christie mystery. She has so many different little threads that all just come together to like tie up to make the story. So many red herrings. And sometimes I'm like, yes, I think I figured something out, and I'm really proud of myself for figuring something out, and then it turns out that, no, that was just a red herring to just throw you off, even though she doesn't make the red herrings obvious all of the time. Like I say, it was something that's thrown in there for you to kind of feel smart about, so that you feel like you're solving it when really you're not. And I do love that about her. So this is one of my favorite Hercule Poirots that I've read. I really enjoyed it. However, I did have a problem, and this is a problem that I had with Murder on the Orient Express as well in particular. There are some decisions made around justice in particular. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's some decisions made around that I just don't agree with. And it happened kind of in Murder on the Orient Express as well. And I can't get behind those decisions, and I just don't like that part of it. So it kind of brought the book down a little bit, but overall I did really, really enjoy the mystery and all the unraveling and all the just suspense and tension. I did really enjoy it, and in the end I gave that one 4 stars. Next, I read The Merciless 4 Last Rites by Danielle Vega. So this is the 4th book in the Merciless series, and I enjoyed this. It's an enjoyable series. It's still very cheesy in its horror, which I enjoy. The horror aspects of this do take a lot longer to get going. Like, it is a much slower build, I think, than the previous 3 books. But I did enjoy it for the most part, and like enjoy the ride of kind of getting there, and I enjoy all that cheesy horror kind of once we get there. There are some parts towards the end that just, all of these types of stories are never like believable, obviously, but this, even towards the way that characters reacted to things in particular at the end, I was just like, I just don't buy that anyone would react like that. And then there's also a part of the ending that I think is supposed to feel like it's a twist. But if you've read the previous 3 books, then it's pretty obvious where you're headed. So that kind of fell a little bit flat for me. But it was very, very enjoyable. In the end, I gave it 3.25 stars. I then read Southern Perfection by Casey Peeler. This is a book that I had been approved for on NetGalley a really long time ago. It is a YA contemporary romance set in the South, and it basically follows this girl who was orphaned when she was 6, I think, 5 or 6, and she now lives with her parents and her grandmother were all killed in this car accident, and she now lives with her grandfather. So it's just her and her granddad, and it's about a boy who she knew from when she was a kid, and he'd moved away, and he moves back to her hometown, and it's about a romance basically that forms between the two of them. It's about their romance. I really, really didn't like this book. I went on quite a few rants about this book in my vlogs. If you guys have seen that, then you know. But it was really, really over the top is the main thing that bothered me about it, just in every aspect. Every character felt the need to, the main female character is just such a perfect character, and everyone felt the need to tell this male character, like everyone they came across in town would just tell him how amazing she was, or tell her that they could tell that he was so in love with her, and everyone spoke about them like they were this fated, meant to be romance, even though they're only 17. And it's not that I don't think that some people do meet the loves of their life when they're 17. I know that that happens, but I think that the general population is more likely to believe that it's not a fated romance than that it is, and I wouldn't think that the entire town would believe that it's this fated romance. There's also a really weird thing in there with her cousin that, I don't know, I wasn't really into, and it was just over the top, and I just didn't like it. I also didn't like the writing. The writing I thought was not good. The dialogue was extremely hard to tell at different points in the story who was talking, and there was also, the main thing that I really bothered me was the overuse of character names, like mid-dialogue. Characters would be like mid-conversation and continually using the other character's name to address them at the start of like every new sentence, even though they would mid-conversation. That's just not how people speak. And it really bothered me. Every time it was happening in a conversation, I was just like, no, stop saying their names. It was really annoying. So as I'm sure you guys can tell, I didn't really like this book. I gave it 2 stars. As I mentioned in my vlog, I generally save my 1-star ratings for books that I find really offensive or just completely pointless. I didn't feel that way about this book. I really didn't enjoy it, but there are a lot of people out there who do 4- and 5-star ratings all over the joint. Not offensive or anything. I just really didn't like it, so I gave it 2 stars. Next, I read Shadow Study by Maria V. Schneider. So this is the first book in the 2nd Shadow series, but is actually the 7th book in the Chronicles of Ixia, like, overall series. So this one is back following the characters from the original Study trilogy. I was really happy to be back with them, following them. It did take me a little while to get into, because I was still really salty on this world generally because of how the last Glass book ended, and so I was still feeling a little bit bitter about it, if I'm being honest, and so it took me a little while to get into, but I did eventually and I did really enjoy it. We get a character who I really enjoy. We get their backstory. We get another character who I really enjoy. We get their POV in this, which I really loved. I also love that the main character, Yelena, there's a circumstance going on in this book that makes it so that she's kind of brought back to being this very similar type of character to how she was in the very first book. And I really, really enjoyed that. I will say that I don't think Maria V. Schneider writes villains very well. There's a lot of the villains in this are people who had been in the previous trilogy. I'm not going to tell you who they are because that is a spoiler. But every time they came up, it was talked about like as if you were supposed to be like, oh, this person's back. And I was like, who's that again? I just don't remember them because the villains that she's written in most of her books just aren't that memorable to me. And I do think that her books can be pretty predictable. I'm never that shocked by anything that goes on in them, but they are enjoyable and I enjoy the world and the characters. I am really interested to see where the next two books are heading because of how this kind of ended and everything we found out in this book. So I'm excited to continue on and read the last two books. So I did enjoy it, and in the end I gave this 3.75 stars. The last book that I read in January was Hello Mallory by Anne M. Martin. This is the 14th book in the Babysitters Club series and follows Mallory, who we have met in previous books, but this is her joining the Babysitters Club and becoming a member. We also get the introduction of Jessie in this one, which I really liked. And I didn't actually mention in my vlog, and I should have, but one of the things I did like about this book is that there is quite a bit of commentary in there because Jessie has just moved to the town in this book and she is a black character, and the town that they live in is a very predominantly white, and you do get a lot of commentary in there and her talking about how out of place she feels and how people haven't been very welcoming, and you know, she doesn't feel like her family is being treated the way they would be treated if it was a white family moving to the area. Really appreciated all of that in there. And it was just enjoyable. Nothing totally amazing in this one, just very kind of run-of-the-mill in terms of what's going on in it. Nothing super, super amazing, but I did really enjoy it, as I always enjoy the Babysitters Club books, and in the end I gave that one 3 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of January. I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below if you've read any of the books that I've read, if you've got any thoughts or what you guys have been reading in January. Do you have a favorite book that you read? My favorite book, which was in my mid-month wrap-up, was definitely Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I'm still thinking about that book. I loved that book. That was my 5-star rating this month. Definitely my favorite of the month. I would love to chat with you guys down below, like I said, about what your favorite was. Please like the video if you liked it. Please subscribe if you want to see more from my channel. But that is all I have for this video today. Bye, guys.